The Republicans are all going after Ron Paul, saying, hey, you know what? This guy is no good. He is a dangerous isolationist. In fact, here comes Newt Gingrich with a 2x4. Let's go to clip number 7 first.
As people get to know more about Ron Paul, who disowns 10 years of his own newsletter, says he didn't really realize what was in it, had no idea what he was making money on, had no idea that it was racist, anti-Semitic, called for the destruction of Israel, talked about a race war. All this is a sudden shock to Ron Paul. There'll come a morning people won't take him as a serious person. And I think as a protest, he's a very reasonable candidate.
As a protest candidate, but it's not a serious candidate. Well, I thought you were going to stay positive. I thought you weren't going to go negative. Now, you're bringing up the newsletters? Look, I think that's totally fair game. But all of a sudden, Newt Gingrich is concerned that Ron Paul is racist. But of course, you saw his real concern. And anti-Semitic and not pro-Israel enough. Ron Paul is not a serious candidate, okay? So interesting that now you've got Republicans bringing up the newsletters. By the way, the reason he doesn't emphasize racist as much is, one, because he probably doesn't care that much, and two, because that's not really going to win him any votes in Iowa. But he can go to the evangelicals in Iowa and go, Ron Paul doesn't love Israel as much as I love Israel. Come on, fundamentalists, vote with me. But he's going to get even tougher in this next clip.
Now, if he were to get the Republican nomination, let's say he were, could you vote for him?
No.
What would you do if the choice were Ron Paul or Barack Obama?
I think you'd have a very hard choice at that point.
What would you do?
I don't know.
But look, when pressed on it, he just said, I will not vote for Ron Paul, okay? So, and by the way, his home state is Virginia. He was left off the ballot because of his own incompetence. So I guess that means he's voting for Mitt Romney. Because those are his only two choices in the primaries in Virginia, if he goes to vote at all in the primary. So there's great irony there. But look, they hate Ron Paul. The establishment Republicans despise him. Why? Because he doesn't want to start any more wars. And all those Republicans are hooked on the defense contractor money. You know how much campaign funding they get from people who make a ton of money, not just from the defense contractors, but also from the oil companies. Anytime there's a war in the Middle East, the price of oil skyrockets, and ExxonMobil and all those other companies make a tremendous amount of money from that, right? So and there's no way that this Republican establishment is going to allow Ron Paul to win. They despise him, right? So what does Ron Paul do? Instead of shying away from the issue, he doubles down. Get a load of this ad where he says, this is not isolationism. This is just rational. Look at what we're stirring up in the rest of the world. Watch.
Imagine for a moment that somewhere in the middle of Texas, there was a large foreign military base. Say Chinese or Russian. Imagine that they operated outside of U.S. law and that the Constitution did not apply to them. Imagine that every now and then they made mistakes or acted on bad information and accidentally killed or terrorized innocent Americans, including women and children, most of the time with little or no repercussions or consequences. Imagine if they elected a leader who promised to bring them home and put an end to this horror. Imagine if that leader changed his mind once he took office. The reality is that our military presence on foreign soil is as offensive to the people that live there as armed Chinese troops would be if they were stationed in Texas.
All right, now let me tell you something. That ad is awesome. It is fantastic. It allows people to understand, hey, wait a minute. I wouldn't like it either if foreign troops were occupying me in the name of my freedom. What a crock that is. And imagine if you fought back and they called you terrorists or insurgents. You should see the whole ad. It is the kind of thing that makes you pause and go, wait a minute, man. Do you really, as a progressive, have to think twice about who you're actually supporting? Because that ad is 1,000,000 times stronger and better than any ad any Democrat would run on the war. Ron Paul is now leading in Iowa, 23-20. He is now second place in New Hampshire. He is rising. Tide looks really strong. So it has sent the panic throughout the establishment. In fact, Politico has an article titled, Paul Panic Seizes Iowa Establishment. And the quotes inside the article are so damning for what the establishment thinks of outsiders like Ron Paul who want to actually overturn their apple cart. So they talked to one Republican after another. And look at these quotes. Here's Becky Beach, a longtime Iowa Republican who helped President George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. She says, it would make the caucuses mostly irrelevant, if not entirely irrelevant, if Paul wins. She continues, it would have a very damaging effect because I don't think he could be elected president, and both Iowa and national Republicans wouldn't think he represents the will of the voters. So not only does the Iowa caucus become irrelevant if Ron Paul wins, but she says that if he wins, it doesn't even represent the feelings of the real Iowa voters, let alone the national voters. But wait a minute, how can it not represent the feelings of the Iowa voters if they just voted and he came in #1? The establishment is so deathly afraid of Ron Paul that any time that he has got any advantage, they look to minimize it and obliterate it. First, when he was coming in third in some of these polls, they're like, oh, he's just a fringe guy. He comes in third. He's not going to make anything of it. Second, oh, it doesn't count. It's Ron Paul. He's got a lot of active supporters on the ground. When Obama had a lot of active supporters on the ground, they were like, look at Obama. Here comes Obama. Ron Paul, irrelevant, okay? And look, I tell you this 100 times over. I totally disagree with Ron Paul on at least half of his issues. On Social Security, on the income tax, on getting rid of the Department of Education. I don't agree with them. But this isn't right. You tell a guy that even if he wins, even if he comes in #1, not only is it not count, not only does it the all-important Iowa caucus become irrelevant, but that the voters who just voted didn't mean it. It's absurd, but it goes on. It's not just one person. Here's House Speaker Craig Paulson. I don't think any candidate perverting the process in that fashion helps the caucuses in any way, referring to Ron Paul's fervent supporters on the ground. But that's what the whole caucus is about. People who are fervent about a candidate who show up at the caucuses. We've only been doing this for decades. Everybody knows that's what a caucus is. Anytime anybody else wins, they go, oh, look at that. They've got real momentum. They excite people on the ground. Well, the whole reason Obama won the primary was because he did so well in Iowa. And the national press made a huge stink out of it. And I think they were right to. Now when Ron Paul's about to win, no. It's perverting the process to actually win the caucus. These quotes are mind-blowing. So Politico summarizes, by the way, what is the new short version of what the Republicans plan to do if Ron Paul wins? Ignore him anyway. If he was losing, they ignore him. If he's winning, they ignore him. Just don't, whatever you do, do not vote for Ron Paul, because he's not interested in the same corrupt politics that has been going on in Washington forever. That's why the establishment's in a panic, because he's about to take away their money for their bread money. They're like, well, we make all of our money being corrupt. Ron Paul won't let us do it. So here's Governor Terry Branstad, the governor of Iowa, quote, people are going to look at who comes in second and who comes in third. Oh, for Christ's sake. He continues, if Mitt Romney comes in a strong second, it definitely helps him going into New Hampshire and the other states. So now, when Ron Paul was coming in second or third, being second or third was irrelevant. If Ron Paul is first, no, then what's relevant is coming second or third. But this is a joke. I mean, I've never seen a joke this grotesque. I mean, this comical. Who can possibly say who wins is irrelevant? The most important thing is who comes in third. These people they're scared to death of Ron Paul. Finally, like in the 19th paragraph of this Politico article, I finally see a quote that says, Dr. Paul is hands down the most authentic, principled candidate in the race. I'm like, oh, finally, good. Who said it? Paul's campaign chairman, Jesse Benton. Outside of Paul's campaign, there's not one positive thing said about the leading candidate in Iowa from the entire party, okay? When they asked Doug Gross, a leading Republican lawyer and Branstad advisor, how severe a wound it would be if Paul won, he said it would be, quote, a mortal wound. Look at how much the establishment is scared to death of Ron Paul. They're like, oh, damn, the doctor is coming. And he's going to overturn our apple cart and say, no, you don't get to take money anymore and just do the bidding of your donors. And reading these quotes makes me want to campaign for Ron Paul. And I totally, fervently, adamantly disagree with him on probably more than 50% of his issues. Here's another one. They're not done yet. I love this one. Sam Clovis, he's a local talk show host. He says, I think a Paul win would be devastating for the state of Iowa and the caucus process. Now, are you ready for who Clovis is supporting instead? Rick Santorum. Now, do you get that? Rick Santorum's chances of winning the overall national candidacy for the Republicans is far lower than Ron Paul's. So if their excuse was, oh no, Ron Paul can't win the overall national race for the Republicans, that's why we think it would hurt the Iowa caucuses and make them irrelevant if he won the Iowa caucus. Well, then how can you possibly say that if Rick Santorum wins, it'll be better? No, it would be worse under that logic, because it isn't about Ron Paul's effect on the Iowa caucuses. It's about his effect on this endemic corruption that they're all hooked on. They're like, no, don't take the IV drip off, Dr. Paul. Don't do it. We're hooked on that money that we get because we're all corrupt, sellout politicians. Rick Santorum, he'll keep it going. Rick Perry, Mitt Romney, all those other guys, who cares? They'll keep it going. Don't do it to us, doctor. Why are you winning? Why are you perverting the process by winning? Finally, conservative activist Tamara Scott. Now, she's Bachmann State co-chair, right? So she's got a horse in this race. But nonetheless, another quote just like the others that gives you a perfect sense of this. To see the process hijacked would be a concern for those who consider the honor we have of being first in the nation. So when Michelle Bachmann was leading the polls in Iowa, it was the greatest thing in the world, and of course she deserved it. But if Ron Paul wins, he has hijacked the process. I'm still not quite there, but the more I read this stuff, the more I think, hey, you know what? Maybe it's time to take our chances with Dr. Ron Paul. Because if the establishment is this deathly afraid of him, he certainly must be doing something right.